Unchurned is presented by UpdateAI.
There's a lot of happy years and hiding the real assessment of the situation that goes on in high pressure CS roles.
Yeah.
The success doesn't mean there are no problems in a customer, state, in a customer health check or in a customer situation. The success is we minimize surprises for everyone, meaning even to the customer. If we are going to have a problem, if we have a bug that's going to take a long time, if we have a service disruption, we have to minimize the surprise for the customer. We have to tell them internally, if there is a risk of competition, if there is a risk of pricing pressure, we have to tell those things. And it doesn't mean you're not doing your job, dear CSM. This is the job.
All right. Welcome to this week's episode, everybody. I am Josh Schachter, your co-host of Unchurned, here with the incredible Kristi Faltorusso, my co-host.
We have not been able to get like the three of us together, you, me, and John, for some weeks now.
Yeah, I know. John's detained today. Not at the border, but he's just detained. He couldn't get here.
Well, we don't know, actually.
We don't know. It could be. You never
we can
know.
only go by what he's told us,
That's
which is usually just lies.
We have a great guest, Miss Ozge Ozcan, CCO of Forter. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to hand over the rest of the show to Kristi Faltorusso. Thank you for being on the episode.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay. So to start, we want to learn a little bit about Forter, what you guys do as a context, right? What you do, what the organization, what your organization, operates as and looks like. Tell us a little bit about Forter.
Yeah, definitely. Forter is a software provider for e-commerce vertical. So that's where it starts. And then we provide customer experience optimization in multiple touch points of e-commerce. We work with some of the logos that you hopefully are shopping on a daily, weekly, and we are just a couple of days before the Cyber Week, actually. So hopefully you will do some Black Friday, Cyber Monday shopping as well. Think about Wayfair, eBay, Nike, Adidas, Home Depot. Those are all of our customers. And what we do for them is there is a lot of actually fraud or good behaviors and bad behaviors that happens across the e-commerce journey, right? It starts with when you log into a website, there can be account takeovers, which can really be dangerous for your loyalty points or identity points. While you're actually shopping, there might be some coupons. We sometimes, I don't know if you have ever done it, but that 20% first customer coupon, and then you use another email to get another 20%, another email.
Never. I've never done that.
Right? We've never done those things, right? So we actually optimize those kind of touch points, customer experience touch points. And obviously at the checkout, we do a fraud check to make sure that you are who you are. And we can protect, from bad actors, our customers, and really optimize for the good actors. But think about it in all touch points of e-commerce. And the secret sauce is we have an identity graph that we actually know, a lot of identities in the e-commerce space. We almost know 99% of US and 90+ % of Europe and Asia. And we see our customers every other week. So it's a very fresh database. Our customers
who is who, who
yes,
the shoppers are.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And obviously, we use that to protect the e-commerce out there. And you being, let's say, a merchant, you might see a customer every other month, every other maybe 6 months, but we see a customer in our network every other week. So it's a very fresh set of behavioral signals. That's the gist of it.
And you sell the data to all their competitors. No, I'm just joking.
Well, no, but I am curious though, like if it's your database of user and identity, like are you able then to see, like if I'm on Nordstrom and then I end up going over to Saks and I make a purchase there, like are you able to see those buying behaviors and patterns? And then are you able to share patterned data, anonymizing the end user, but are you able to share that with your customers?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the beauty of the network, right? Once you're in the Forter e-commerce network, you are not only protected for a customer doing something on Nordstrom or let's say doing something different on eBay, we are able to actually see the patterns. Because here is the thing that no one talks about. Fraud is using exactly the same tactics or techniques that we are all using, right? AI, cheap cloud infrastructure, Gen AI coming up, right? You will not believe actually how many advancement has been happened just in the last 6 months. So if you place a consortium that will help protection, that's how you get ahead. And that's what Forter's network is.
Incredible.
So it's
How
really
big is-
about protecting the retailers or the e-commerce brands, not the consumer, right?
No, it is actually, if you think about it, it's protecting Kristi, because if someone steals your credit card and starts shopping on your behalf or takes over your identity, it's actually protecting both our direct customers who are the merchants and their end customers who are all of us basically.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
How big's the company? How old's the company? What stage you at? And then in your org, how many people report up to you?
Okay, so the company is 10 years old. We are a global company, around 550 employees now, across multiple locations from America to Europe to APAC region. I have around, I think, right now, as I said, we have been hiring really aggressively, probably approaching 100 across multiple teams. So under the customer organization, I have customer success, technical implementation, technical support, analytics, and also recently our customer marketing team.
And you're hiring. And you're also an advisor to other startups, and they're hiring too. So you are, Ozge, you are the one to know right now, like the only one to know in the industry.
I don't know if the only one, but hopefully one of the ones to know. And yes, the good talent is never looking for the next thing. So we have to, find them where they are and get them attracted to hopefully be interested in their next thing. And I wish no one does that to my own top talent. But anyway, that's the game. Yeah. We need to retain and hire well. But yes, if someone who is listening to this show is looking for their next thing and interested, any logos they can see in my LinkedIn, I'm very happy to make introductions and help in that very difficult career transition.
So what are the themes that you're seeing, though, when it comes to hiring in the space right now? Did you catch that?
I think, yeah. There was a bit of a disconnect, but I think now we are back. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Mm-hmm. So I think there are two trends that I'm seeing. One is everyone is looking for that magical unicorn principal CSM who can communicate in all levels of a customer, engagement, can communicate, can handle an executive conversation, can handle a user conversation, can understand communicating business value, can be a project manager, on all fronts. So there's a lot of demand out there for really good principal individual contributors. And then the second trend is the companies are going through in their journey of, post-COVID, cost-effective growth, customer retention becoming really important. Growth is slowing down, so you really need to protect and expand your revenue base. So there is a lot of leadership positions now to bring some playbooks and some expansion focus. Those are the two, job profiles that I see that are really highly demanded.
What are you looking for when you think about people? Because tell us a little bit about at Forter. You're taking on more of a revenue focus, right, through the whole revenue lifecycle. So maybe you can share a little bit about that initiative on your end, and then how that's driving the types of folks that you're looking for to grow within your current company, within your current team, and then also to bring in to the growing team. Yeah,
that's a great question. So customer success or customer organizations take different shapes and forms, right? It depends on where your product maturity is, where your GTM maturity is. So there is no simple single answer. In Forter right now, our product is extremely stable and actually on a really good roadmap. So for us, it's all about commercial conversations, expansions, and customer outcomes, and how we expand with our revenue. So also differently from some other customer organizations, we commercially also responsible for renewals, all the renewal baseline, and creating expansion. So there are really revenue KPIs that we are measured on. That doesn't mean technical skill set is a secondary thing, but that's really where the, let's say, the gear can switch a little bit to more high. So I'm looking for profiles. I'm looking for people who are driven by owning that number and having KPIs and actually connecting the customer outcomes to revenue for Forter. It takes a certain personality to be okay with that kind of accountability and exposure, right? While balancing a very customer service mindset. So it's not an easy combination. But when we find it, it's really magical. It really helps both the team and the customers and the company all at the same time.
Now, when you're hiring, are you also indexing on subject matter expertise? Like, do you care if this person has any experience working with retailers or in the e-commerce space? Do you find that there's an added benefit, especially if you're asking these folks to be as strategically aligned with their customers enough so that they're having these, revenue generating conversations? Do you find a benefit there?
Yeah, if I get my wish list, I would absolutely, want that to exist, either an e-commerce background or a payments background or some kind of a vertical background. But having said that, I've optimized this all my career. I rather hire people who are intellectually curious and driven by learning the new thing, because in 6 months' time, in probably 12 months' time, my product setup, where I'm really innovating, what the competitive landscape is going to shift anyway. So I might optimize for vertical knowledge, but that vertical knowledge is probably going to change and, not be relevant. So yes, if I get an intellectually curious person and they have been in the vertical, Christmas present. But I go for more the curiosity side.
So let me ask a question, because I think if I recall here, there's been a more of a shift for you guys over the past, I don't know if it's been 12 months or longer, but really a shift in focus around revenue. Now, when you started building out the team, did the initial team that you hire, I mean, obviously the profile may have looked a little different, right? So you probably weren't over indexing on revenue experience. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I've been here for 2 years. There has been already a team that was built up and servicing customers, and they were doing a tremendous job, right? So this was not a let's break things down and build the cake kind of role for me. Having said that, the focus and what we have been celebrating has been very focused on churn mitigation. Mm-hmm. And I think there are so many other customer success teams out there that they do the same thing, right? Retention of the revenue, protection of the revenue is their job number one, which is great. It's okay, but it has a dark side. If you are measured on churn protection only, you are not looking for expansion. You are probably doing inorganic things to prevent churn, which is discounts, giving away termination clauses, or not challenging the customer to actually think differently, or service the customer in a very cost-ineffective way, right? By putting a lot of manual headcount to just service the customer rather than thinking more effective and scalable way to service the customer. So there is a dark side of a churn obsession that people actually don't talk about. Whereas what I find more helpful, we found
the title to this podcast episode, "The Dark Side of Churn Obsession."
Sure. That's great. Yes.
That's it. That's it right there.
Yes. Yeah. Look, I'm not saying the job is not to watch churn and not to manage it, but I think there are ways to very organically manage it while you focus on expansion. The thing is, in an enterprise segment, with your large customers, if you're not expanding, if they're not adopting more product, meaning they're not seeing the value of actually your innovation, you are likely slowly churning anyway. You just don't know it yet, right? Like that's the problem with the churn obsession, because you actually don't watch the slow churn. You watch the tactical churn. You watch the customers who were just testing your product or they were not the right ICP. And you get obsessed with that part. Whereas there's a slow, I mean, we are going really dark now, but like there's a slow decay happening that no one is watching. So that has been a big journey shift for us, Kristi. And, it touched on everything. It touched on our hiring profile. It touched on our playbooks. It touched on KPIs. I mean, it even touched on like, how do we run our QBRs? Very, very tactical. There was not one thing that we did that changed it. There were probably 1,000 things that has to be done in orchestration. And some of them we failed, some of them we succeeded. We didn't do it all either.
Well, we've got all day, so let's go into each of them.
Yes, right.
Hey, everybody, it's Josh. I'm taking a quick break from the podcast to tell you a bit about UpdateAI. I started UpdateAI to solve two major challenges for CS teams. The first is that we save CSMs 4 to 5 hours per week with our productivity through AI. Secondly, we give leaders a window into all the conversations across each account and the entire portfolio. So we help knowledge transfer, we help increase the coverage model of your CS teams, and we help you detect emerging patterns in what your customers are telling your CSMs across all the risks, product feedback, advocacy moments, and expansion opportunities. So come check us out at www.updateai. It's completely free to sign up and trial. No, but you laid out what? You laid out like 4 or 5 pillars there, and I do want to go into them. Like, what are some of the ways that this infiltrated? Give us the tactical stuff. Give everybody listening here the tactical details of what you guys tried, what worked, and then probably more interestingly for people, what didn't work.
Okay.
And the caveat here, right, is we're talking about enterprise customers. So I think also people need to, right, because we're only talking enterprise. We're not talking mid-market. We're not talking SMB.
Surprisingly, whatever you do in enterprise or whatever you do in SMB actually travels up and down the segments, because you're really touching a mindset shift in your team. I found it valuable to actually apply things cross segments. But yes, there is a flavor change that you need to establish. But I think the common theme persists across the segments. Well, for executives, first of all, it starts with the board and the exec team, right? Like, I think that was what I didn't do right. And then I had to very quickly realize because there was such a celebration on minimum churn and managing churn really, really well. The moment that you didn't talk about it, everyone wanted to talk about it. And I didn't want us to use the churn word, right? I want everyone to ask about expansion, everyone to think about that. So I realized very quickly in my first quarter, I need to actually start top down to that change management.
Because the executives in the boardroom were just focused on what's the churn, and you wanted to flip that on its head and say, no,
yes,
we're talking about expansion here. We're helping to drive revenue. We're not just a cost center helping to reduce churn.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Exactly. And I'm obviously painting a very black and white picture here to make the point. Obviously, there were different people in different, gray zones, but that was point number one. It's very important to actually agree to a timeline of, we are going to take this shift and give me this time for me to execute, right? As an operator, as a GTM operator, as a CCO, CRO, whoever you are, that you're trying to make a change, you need to give a timeline to the board and the executive team for you to actually execute that change, because it's not going to happen over time, right?
What was the timeline you gave and what was the real time?
I gave, you're asking for my forecast methodology now. I gave a 12 to 15 months. We were showing really good signals in 9 months.
Great.
But 9, I was also surprised. I will be very honest. I was expecting a more like 12, a year kind of shift.
But you also, there's the next lesson is that you understate and over deliver, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's why I said you're asking for my forecast
Yes.
methodology.
Yes.
So look, I think the second thing that I did, which can be very tactical, maybe for whoever is listening to us, I actually sat down with the finance department and got a very clear churn budget. How many dollars and how many logos am I allowed to churn in a year? Right? Like what is acceptable? Once I have that, I gave it to my teams. I separated, and that's why, Kristi, I said it might be applicable to a bunch of segments. I gave zero churn budget to my enterprise segment. I said, you cannot churn. But I gave some to my mid-market and SMB segments, right, in varying degrees. And then I said, as long as you're managing to this budget and you are, in the 60% in any given time, I don't want to know.
And you just did it on an annual? You didn't care about monthly, quarterly, anything?
Quarterly. I gave it quarterly. Yeah.
So you took the annual and then you broke it down across quarters.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. We broke it quarterly.
How does the CFO know what your churn budget can be? Like where does that come from?
Well, we have revenue projections, right? And in the revenue projection, you kind of model out what's going to come from new logo, what's going to come from, current revenue base. You have an NRR target. So your NRR breakdown tells you how much churn you are allowed to have. Right. So it's a process that you co-develop with your finance team.
So it's based on their projections. Okay, got it. They're forecasting for the next year. Kristi, stop laughing at me.
Well, I know. I'm sorry, Josh. I couldn't help myself. It was a smirk. It wasn't a laugh. It was just it was cute. It was a cute question.
Yeah,
I do want to dig into this for 1 second, though, because the part that always interests me is how organizations design the NRR target, right? Because that's making assumptions on growth, right? And it's based on existing logos and a whole bunch of things get factored into that. But I'm always curious because I feel like that number is what changes behavior for good and bad in companies. So how did you work with your finance team to find the growth target that you also felt comfortable with owning?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a lot of negotiation, right? It's a lot of also the good conversation that as an operator you should have with your finance team on investment versus metrics. Like what are you going to get as investment and what are you willing to sign up for that investment? What is the ROI of your team, right? Which is at the end of the day, my team's ROI is how higher can I drive the NRR number? Like that's it. I mean, there are a bunch of other metrics, but that's the metric. So I suggest what I have done, and I suggest to actually break down the NRR into its chunks. So you're clearly understanding where you're losing revenue and where you can gain revenue. So I divided into very, very, simple term, positives and negatives. So negatives is churn, discounts, downsizing of volume, right? Like usage, basically. Yep. Cancellations, like whatever you think is going to reduce your NRR, I broke it down. We analyze what was last 2 years trends, and then we decide on what the numbers should look like, right? That's one. On the positives, it's obviously ramping volume, organic growth, right? Price increases, and then expansions. Upsells, cross-sells. The same methodology there. I find it very helpful because it shows you specifically where you are probably losing revenue. And for me, this was what I mentioned. There is a dark side of churn obsession. My NRR number was good at the high level. When I dig deeper, my churn was minimal. Less than 1% for the last 2-3 years, my discounts were completely out of control, right? And if you think about it one step further in the chess game, the more discounts you give, the less expansion you're likely going to have because you're not protecting the value add of your product. You're constantly devaluing your product by giving discounts.
What was the source of those discounts? Why did they give them out?
Well, because the customer says, if you don't give me a discount, I'm going to churn, and then you don't want customer to churn, so you give the discount.
But was it because there's more competition in the market? Was it because they're just like they weren't receiving they didn't think they got the value?
The majority of it was everyone in the industry, just like probably you have done and I have done, was trying to cut cost, right?
Yeah.
So everyone was looking for, yeah, exactly. So that's where it was coming from.
Yeah.
Did you find that there was certain profile? Wait, can I just ask one more question, Josh? No. Can I just ask one more question?
I know. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to interrupt you. We have a little delay on my end. So yeah, that's fine. Go.
Okay. Thanks, Josh. Okay. Now with the profile of folks, because obviously when you break this down, did you find that certain profiles organization were the ones that were generally culprits of discounting? And did this help drive a different profile as you thought about how you're going to grow the team? Like, did you find that folks that didn't really have strong revenue experience or skills were the ones that were more inclined to provide discounts, to be okay with downsells, that was just like save the logo at all negative revenue costs, because they lacked the skills to actually have the appropriate conversations around value and kind of owning that ability to drive the revenue forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're setting me up right way, right? Like there is a profile, there is a little bit of the, so why discounting or why churn happens, right? To Josh's point, you don't communicate the value very well. You don't communicate it to the right person in the right time. Therefore, you're measured on the wrong, KPI. And then you don't feel comfortable in a uncomfortable conversation, right? The last one can be helped with more training, negotiation training, discovery question training, conflict management training. But at the end of the day, it's a little bit also depending on the personality and what you find joy with, right? Do you like winning? Do you like losing? Like they always ask this question to salespeople. It's a little bit same on the CSMs too. So we had to dial up that part on all of our teams actually. How you communicate value, how you defend the value, and when the conversation is going to come up in a maybe a conflicting way, how do you manage that for the good outcome for both parties, right? So yeah, it definitely informed our profile.
I'm afraid to speak. I don't want to speak over Kristi. No. Okay. How did this inform your playbook? And in my company, our nature is talking to customers in meetings. And you mentioned some meetings there. So it could be from a meeting perspective of your interactions with your customers or other parts of the playbook. But you mentioned that was one of the things that informed this, getting away from the churn obsession. So where did that manifest itself?
Yeah. The terminology of happy ears, you guys probably smiling, so you know that one. Yeah. We had a chronic happy ear situation going on because unfortunately my CSMs thought or were expected to actually always present the customer in a good state, because if they were to raise any risk or if they were to actually communicate where the problems were, they thought they were not doing their job. And you asked me about like what worked, what didn't. I think that was the second thing. It took me a while to understand what was going on. And I had to come out and very clearly tell the team, the success doesn't mean there are no problems in a customer, state, in a customer health check or in a customer situation. The success is we minimize surprises for everyone, meaning even to the customer. If we are going to have a problem, if we have a bug that's going to take a long time, if we have a service disruption, we have to minimize the surprise for the customer. We have to tell them internally, if there is a risk of competition, if there is a risk of pricing pressure, we have to tell those things. And it doesn't mean you're not doing your job, dear CSM. This is the job, right? So that was a big playbook change, mindset change, however you would like to categorize that. Because I think there is a lot of happy years and hiding the real assessment of the situation that goes on in high pressure CS roles.
Yeah. I wonder about that. I mean, I've never been a, entry type of level type of CSM. Where does that come from? The happy years, the rose tinted glasses syndrome. And Kristi, I'm looking at you to answer this as well. Like, if I was in that role, I'd want to be doing CYA the whole time and be a squeaky wheel of, hey, there's a risk over here, there's a risk over here, there's a risk over here to cover my own tracks. But why do you, I'm genuinely curious. And so you can, do the cute smirk thing at me now, Kristi, for this. Where does that come from? The happy years syndrome?
I'll give you my perspective, and then obviously I want to hear a different perspective on this, but I'm going to say it's a cultural thing in the organization. If it is not a safe culture for a CSM to raise a flag, or if they are being judged based on how many of their customers are in a good standing versus not good standing, they don't want to paint themselves backwards into this corner where it's their entire book looks like it's on fire. If it does not feel like a collaborative environment where you can actually go and say, this customer is at risk, whether it is product, experience, business, whatever the related drivers of that are, if they don't feel like it is a safe place for them to go and raise that, and it is not a reflection on them and the work that they're doing, then you're going to hear more of that. When you actually drive the business and you're scaring them into saying, like, your job is to have a book that is all green all the time where these customers are happy and getting value, and they're being penalized if that's not the case, of course no one's going to go and raise their hand voluntarily and say, hey, look, my book's on fire. For my team, though, I'm like, tell me your whole book is on fire. I don't want to say they get penalized, but when I see that my team is actually rating their customers extremely satisfied, those are the ones I almost always drill down into, because that to me says there is nothing else we can do better. And I guarantee you there's always something we can be doing differently to enhance the value that customer is getting or the experience that they're having. So if you look at my book, there is not one customer right now that a CSM would say is extremely satisfied, because I would rather see that there is something else we could or should be doing as a business rather than for me to sit here pretending like the universe is perfect for any one of my customers, because I just know that that's not the case. But I would say it's a cultural driver, my opinion.
For me, in the entrepreneurship world in which I live, there's this creed of only the paranoid survive, which is the same thing. Like, and I can imagine that would be the case if I was a CSM. It would be like only the paranoid survive. But I think
there's a balance, Josh, too, because you can't also be the person where it's like everything's on fire. Like, I do really think that there's like an art and a science. Sure. Like, what is the severity of what it is that you're hearing, right? Is it like, hey, the entire product doesn't work for me and I cannot use this. It is preventative, and so it's a blocker. Okay, that's one thing. But if the customer's like, hey, like, I really wish your orange button was about all the day, like all the time, that isn't going to be prohibitive. They're not going to not renew. There's not a business blocker. There's nothing prohibiting them from continuing to stay or grow with you. So I think it's also like, how do you read the room and forecast it, to the point earlier? Like, how are you forecasting this a little bit from a state of value realization, experience, kind of all combined?
Ozge, can we just blame it on Gen Z?
No, we cannot, because I have many segments. But the beautiful thing that happened after we had that conversation very openly in a QBR, where in a way I had to stop the conversation and say, this cannot be, where we are, because then we are saying, this is how I put it to team to actually trigger some reactions. I said, so you're basically telling me I can stop investing in product and I can stop investing on this team because we are all good, right? And then the team is like, maybe not actually. And then the truth started to come out. So the reason I think sometimes also the teams, the individual contributors, they don't understand how the investment decisions, how the strategy of a company is done. So for instance, if you are able to bring me the knowledge that the product is the challenging common pattern of the customer, we will invest in the product. If you're telling me competition, we will invest in branding and differentiation, right? If you're telling me pricing is off, I will invest in my product packaging and pricing. So I think it has to be done in a very open way to tell the CSM team that you are actually my signal on where I invest in the company, because you do know what the customers are demanding of the company, right? That empowerment sometimes also doesn't happen. So in addition to everything Kristi said, I totally agree, but there's also this connecting. Why are we asking you to state the real assessment of a customer portfolio? Is because then we can invest in the right place in the right time with the right urgency also.
How do you get your team to accurately prioritize? Because it could be true that there is a product issue. It could be true that there's a pricing issue. It could be true that there's an experience issue. How do you help your team understand how to prioritize when they're hearing multiple signals across their customer base?
Together with the customer, I think is the right way. And I'm not sure if there is a clear prioritization. Sometimes you have to not prioritize, and sometimes there is the old, maybe not very effective way of small steps in multiple fronts rather than a full resolution in only one front, right? So the customers sometimes appreciate that you're actually making improvements, even though small, in multiple fronts and communicating it. Because I am yet to see a startup who has product, pricing, and value conversation all together, all at the same time, working great, right? Like, they might have it for 3 months and then something will happen and it will drop again. The trick here is the customers who are buying software from startups or innovative companies, they also know what they are buying. They know the trade-off of investing in an innovation versus investing, the trade-off that innovation comes with a little bit, not fully stable, not fully baked service models, what have you. I think being very honest about that with the customer is the right way to go here. And just engaging the customer to say, like, look, there are 3 things we can work on. Which one is your priority? Which one is going to take me a long time to invest? Which one I can show you, maybe 10% of what you're asking, and just solve it together. This is the same thing. Instead of hiding it from the customer and pretending all is great, is actually involving them in problem solution. I find that more, helpful.
Yeah. So let the truth shall always set you free is what you're saying. Being very upfront and setting the right expectations with the customer.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
You'll be very surprised how open the customers are when you actually are also open with them.
Yeah.
On what's going on. Obviously, I'm not saying, expose all your startup problems to a customer they cannot solve. But I think it's co-problem solving, just like co-value creation, right? You're creating value together. It's their business and your technology as the partnership.
I agree. Last question for you. So in the spirit of the presidential election and transition, everybody talks about the first 100 days of the new presidency. So in your first 100 days of 2025, you're focused on expansion. What's like the top thing tactically, strategically on, I guess the strategy part is the expansion, but tactically, what's the top thing on your plate when you start the new year to help your team to get those NRRs to soar?
Yeah. Can I start my 100th day before the year starts?
Sure. Yeah. Starting right after Thanksgiving, it starts.
Yeah. After Cyber Week. So look, hopefully you're going to, at this point, I know a high level target that I need to. Oh, did we lose Kristi? Should we wait?
Yeah, that's okay. We didn't need her anyways.
Okay. Oh my God. So what I was going to say. Yes. So first of all, hopefully I know my next year target. Hopefully, other leaders at this point listening to this, they also know what kind of, numbers they have to deliver next year. Ballpark is even okay. Hopefully you also know what kind of investment or team size or budget you need to actually use to deliver those numbers. I will sit down and, I'm right now doing it. I'm making sure that my headcount plan is aligned with my growth and what I need to deliver. Who am I going to hire? When am I going to hire them? Their ramp up time, what I expect from them, how the team is going to work together. That's point number one. Point number two is I actually do this every 6 months. I check my cadence calendar to make sure that my calendar is aligned with the priorities that I need to drive. I do like a calendar detox every 6 months. I delete some of the meetings. I change their frequency. I adjust their cadence. You will be surprised how much it's like a seasonal cleaning, how much actually irrelevant or unnecessary meetings accumulate if you don't just stop them. So I do that for next year's cadence. I will probably put a little bit more emphasis on teams that I need to collaborate more. And maybe I will move my attention away from teams that I feel they're in a good place, right? So that's my own personal assessment. And then the third thing is, every week I talk with customers, but I think whatever my top accounts, for next year that can make a meaningful impact for my revenue numbers, I have to know what they are thinking for next year. So I need to do a lot of either me or the other executives that I assign to those accounts. We do an executive take-in for the new year. So we completely know what their executive agenda is. That might be related to Forter, might be completely unrelated. Regardless, it's very helpful to know those.
Kristi, welcome back. Ozge, I think we're going to leave it at that. This was such a great conversation. Thank you for really opening up to us about all the ins and outs of your priorities, of the activities that have worked, that haven't worked, and your plans for 2025. I think it's amazing that you guys are growing, that you're building out and hiring more people and more leaders into the new year. And so I hope you can share this episode with all of those candidates that are in the pipeline so they can get a real sneak peek at how you operate. I think this would be very helpful for them. And if they've enjoyed it, they should give it 5 stars. Wishing you the very best for the new year. Have a wonderful holiday. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kristi.
Thank you.
Guys,
Thank you. Enjoy the Cyber Week.
Bye, guys.